this one is a bead hook again, same curve shank hook. I've already pinched the barb, installed the bead on it, and we'll move on to our under wraps. So same thing, every fly. We're going to tie our under wrap with 4 or 5 wraps of thread and cut off the tag. I'll wrap to the back. The pheasant tail we just worked on and the hare's ear are 2 of they're considered very old traditional flies. But the actual traditional way to tie a true hare's ear is to take the tail is supposed to be guard hairs. 30 years I've never tied a tail out of guard's hairs. You see those? These things are, I don't want to mess with those. So the way I was taught to tie a pheasant tail was actually squirrel tail. Gray squirrel tail, I think, was what I was taught. This is a red squirrel tail. And we've got some squirrel body and things like that around. The key is just some type of relatively rough body hair from any animal will look fantastic. So I'm going to pull a little clump of hair off the squirrel tail. If you're working with a tail like this, or even the body patch, remember when we pulled our feathers down 90 degrees to get them to even up? It does the exact same thing working with hair on the tail. If I pull them down and out 90 degrees before I clip them, then the majority of them are going to be the same length. And any that aren't, I can just grab here, strip off the thin ones, and I've got a relatively even tail. We're going to tie our tail in exactly like we did on the pheasant tail. The more I mess with it, the smaller my clumps get. Tying our tail, mine's a little shaggy, I'm just going to put that with that. And we can trim off our tail section. I think the squirrel body you guys have is actually going to work better than this tail for this one. Now we're going to add a wire rib. Traditional is a when I keep saying traditional on this one, it's just because of the old standard recipe. None of it really matters, like I said, as far as being exact for materials. The traditional way is with a gold tinsel wire, which is it's a fiber that has a thin gold tinsel wrapped around it. It's going to be bulkier than the wire that we're using. But that is the traditional gold ribbed hare's ear uses a tinsel rather than a solid wire. So from here, we got it pretty easy. We're just going to make a dubbing loop like we did with our peacock, like we did with our dubbing last week. I'm going to spiral this ahead to where I plan on doing this. And I'm going to take some of this hair dubbing. You can use wax or not. I think I'll use wax today. We're going to make a dubbing loop of our rabbit hair. This is one of those perfect times where John's dubbing tool is ideal for this. So I can do it in my hand, I can have it around there. See that I've got myself a nice rabbit yarn. pieces. I like to work with this in my hacker pliers. Gives me something to hang on to a little better. I'm going to build my body. Notice when you spin dubbing, a lot of times you'll end up with a section right close to the body that is thin. You can either try to fill that when you spin up your dubbing, or you can just make a couple extra close wraps to eat up that section. Make that a little bit tighter for the body, so. I'm going to run my when we're done, you're going to notice the proportions on this flare. It should be really close to the proportions on the pheasant tail we just did, as far as body, wing case, thorax. When I get to where I'm going, I'm just going to tie that in. Clip off my extra dubbing loop. And just like we've done in the past, we're going to take our rib, spiral it forward. Mine's a piece of red wire because it was what's sitting in the wastebasket here underneath my vines. It'll give me a hare's ear with a little different flash to it. And once I've got my rib in, I can cut my wire as well. Now we're going to tie a wing case just like we did on the pheasant tail, except traditionally it's mallard feather. We've got a turkey feather. Like I said, if you guys were to come to, in a couple of years, come to the class we do in March, which is quite a bit more advanced. What we do is give out information on what the fly is going to be and what the materials and the instructor is going to tie with. Everybody's on their own. Most of us won't go shop based on the list that Bill sends out, right? If you see something and you say, well, I've got this in my bag, I can substitute, I've got this in my bag, I can substitute. And so you'll end up with 10 guys that have working off the same pattern with slightly different materials, and they'll have slightly different looks to it, but should all be just as effective. Talk to guides. While I'm talking, we're going to do another dubbing loop right behind our piece of turkey feather to wind our thorax. But if you talk to a lot of guides, the recommendation is, like if you go to the green during cicada season, they'll tell you fish cicadas. And you say, well, which one? They'll say, anyone but what they have at the fly shop, right? Because everybody on the river that's not being guided is fishing the one that they bought at the fly shop. And they all look the same. And the guides are more successful because they're all tying the same size, same general shape, but because it's different hands working with sometimes slightly different substituted materials, they all look different, just slightly. All right, so I've got my dubbing done. You notice I spun it and it wasn't quite coming together how I wanted, so I went to the second method, which is this, I call it the spit and twist. Right, a little bit of saliva on your finger and it'll condense your body down quite a bit. I'm just going to wrap this until I have a nice full body. General, I want it to be about twice the thickness probably of the body of the fly. So it sticks out a little bit. I want it a little bigger than that even. Hares' ears aren't known for their perfect length. proportions they're known for working.
What size do you generally use in a Provo?
I don't fish anything bigger than an 18 on the Provo for any fly. Except for the green drakes. Alright, I've got my rod here, and you notice this time, last time I ended up with too big of a collar behind the bead. I don't fish bead heads in Utah either. I usually fish in the bounce rig here, so I haven't been tying bead heads as much lately. So this time I purposely crowded the bead a little bit because I know that the backside of the bead where it's the larger diameter, as I'm tying these things in, the material and the extra thread is going to fall into that hole for me. So while I'm purposely crowding it slightly, it's not like crowding or working right against the So all I did was pull my wing case forward and put a single wrap over the top to hold it down. And add a little tension with my palm, 2 or 3 good securing wraps. Trim off the excess. And this fly is done except for a wet finish. Same general mayfly shape as the pheasant tail we just did. Little different materials is all. Now, notice how it's fuzzy stuff sticking out. Pheasant tail is actually supposed to be like that. That's why we leave the guard hairs in our dubbing. But as I look at this, I notice I got a spot on this side and a spot on this side where it's kind of matted down. So I can use my dubbing brush, kind of pluck some of that out if I want. Every time I use a dubbing brush, I don't know about other people, every time I use a dubbing brush, it always brushes more than I want by the time I'm done. So I'll go back in and just do some minor clipping out in the air to get some of the crazy ones. It's got to look good to the fisherman. And that's it. People have said, you know, the common thought is that the Hares Ear imitates the mayfly most, but a lot of people think it's also a decent imitation for a sow-bug, a few other odds and ends. It's pretty imitative compared to when you get into some of the more technical